Hello again, and welcome to War Stories, behind the scenes tales from the front lines of the media. I am your host, Tom Curley, and I welcome you to the show today. Now, for those of you that don't know what the show is, basically it's where myself and anybody that I can drag in, we were all worked in the media, and we tell stories, stuff that happened behind the scenes, in front of the camera, behind the camera. I personally was a director and an audio guy and a technician and a chief bottle washer. The only thing I didn't do with floors for the CBS television network for almost 40 years. And of course, I couldn't do it without my co-partner in crime, Mr. Garry Armstrong. Garry, how the heck are you doing today?
Just fine, except I'm picking up weird noises inside my headset, which is over my hearing application. For any people who are tuning in for the first time, I'm hearing impaired, so I have a cochlear implant in my right ear, a hearing aid in my left ear, and over those I have the headset, which picks up airports, picks up police calls, in addition to whatever we're talking about on the podcast. So if you see me signaling for a drone to drop over my house, that's what's going on.
Okay, well, we will keep that in mind. And we have another guest this week. I'm really happy to introduce again for the second time on our show, John Corcoran, veteran TV
That's me.
entertainment reporter and a movie critic. John, how are you today?
I could not be any better. Hmm. I'm fine. I'm ready to go. Ask me anything. I have stories. I have information. You ask, I tell.
Very good, very good. So, or not. So, guys, all right, John. Seeing that you're our guest, this is your second shot. We'll let you go first. You've got a couple of cool stories. So, give us the first one. I think the first one was about a TV anchor, a black TV anchor, and something involving salad.
Yeah, well, a particular kind of salad. And I'm sure you have reminded people in the past that this show is rated a very, very hard PG-13. So what happened was this woman named Renee Poussaint, she was probably, I've been told, she was the first network African-American reporter, a network reporter, to take a job as an anchor person at a local station. It was at our station. Classy lady, very smart, unflappable. And this is a good example of unflappability because she was filling in for a morning yacker, morning talk show. And on it, we had a salad guy who was explaining how to make fine salads. I was on for some reason, and I think a minister or somebody. And the salad guy was explaining how to do particular salads and how people could find particular salads around the Washington, D.C. area, which is where we were working at the time. And as is often the case with TV, you know, they run it through the researchers and all that stuff. And they find out that you got to go to the phones and get the people, the real people calling in and telling their stories. Okay, so the first guy that calls in is Bob. And Bob is supposed to tell us who he's asking where he can find a particular salad. So Bob, what kind of salad? Well, I'd like to know where I can go to find a real nice pussy salad. And the camera was on Renee at the time. And Renee had kind of a little smile on her face, but it didn't change expression at all. Not a change of expression. So cool. And all she said was, well, Bob, certainly not here. Next caller. That's how. And the other one involves technicians who pulled, in my mind, the greatest stunt ever in the history of television on a recalcitrant anchor. An anchor was giving him a hard time. And this was back in the day when they were first coming out of radio news and it was starting to put it on TV. And the first thing you should know is that there wasn't any real decoration to it. There were no sets. There was no clips, nothing to go to, no video. Just a guy rip and read for 15 minutes straight into one camera, and that's what it was. And he had no choice, nowhere to escape to. He just had to read for 15 minutes. Well, he'd been giving these guys a hard time. So, and mostly they had decided they wanted to crack anybody up who was doing the show. It was not not a great gig. It was just an extra 15 minutes. It was not anchoring wasn't that big a deal back then. But this guy came on and he would not. They couldn't crack him up. So finally, they said this is a real challenge, and they got together and they came up with a plan. So last day on the air, and they're going to crack him up. So he starts reading his 15-minute news straight out, nowhere he can go, nothing he can do, no one he can throw to. And the minute he starts reading, the next thing you don't see because it's just off the camera, just out of camera range, is a guy, a techie, bringing a newspaper and putting it essentially under the camera lens, a little bit in front of it. And but nobody sees him put it. They're just putting it there. But the anchorman sees it and he's wondering what is going on here. He knows they're up to something, but he doesn't know what. Next thing that happens is, I'm sure you guys have been in the studios. They have these big metal 10 by 10 cages, devices that they use to change the light bulbs. And they roll them around the studio and you change light bulbs in them. So guy didn't have to climb on a ladder. And they inevitably have a squeaky wheel. So they start rolling one down the studio. It's a squeaky wheel. Till it is, again, just out of camera range. And sitting off right next to the newspaper. Again, the anchor doesn't know what's going on. Well, the next thing that happens is techie slowly climbs up the metal cage and he walks over near the newspaper and in one smooth motion takes off his pants, drops his trowel, leans over the edge and drops a bomb right under the newspaper. Dead solid center. Well, you know what? They had to buy a new studio because the anchor is still in there rolling the ball laughing. They got him.
All right. I thought, wow. I thought that I had great background stories, but holy crap, that one absolutely tops it. Now, the kind of shit that we used to do, yeah, that was all right. When we used to do these news, CBS Market Watch news briefs, they were like little 2-minute, 3-minute things that we would send out to the affiliates, and to make it personalized, we would have to do these custom closes, like an affiliate, if they wanted to, they would send for WBZ in Chicago, I'm Alexis Christoforous. Yep. I'm Ed Crane. Okay. And we would have to do 30 or 40 of these. And we would have to do them every day because they would wear different clothing. And then the local station would take that and then they would tag it on to the end of the report. So it looked like we were reporting just for the, Channel 7 in Boston or whatever. So in the teleprompter was just this endless, for WBZ, I'm Alexis Christoforous. For WWN Miami, I'm Alexis Christoforous. So we used to put stuff in the prompter, especially for Ed Crane. Great guy. In the middle, it would say, I'm Ed Crane for WBZ. I'm Ed Crane and I'm not wearing any pants. I'm Ed Crane and I love sniffing glue. I'm Ed Crane and I'm Ed Crane and I have a foot fetish. And we would catch everybody except Ed Crane. I mean, we could never fool him, no matter how hard we tried. That is great. That is great, John. So, Garry, what do you got up today?
Well, I was not going to tell this first story, but after hearing John Corcoran's story, I think I will do it, but not mentioning any names. We had at TV7 in Boston years and years ago, one of the first black anchors was doing the news, and it had to be around the Christmas holiday seasons. And the anchor was wishing all of our viewers happy holidays. And when she got to the Jewish holiday wish, she said, and we want to wish all of our Jewish viewers a very happy Chanukah. And she smiled again and said to the second camera, again, happy Chanukah to all of our Jewish viewers. And you could hear some snickering in the newsroom, but the general manager, who was of Jewish persuasion, came bursting through the newsroom, and he was about to unleash a verbal volley. And I think he had, in the spin of seconds, he had the realization that he couldn't say anything because A, we were still on the air, and B, if he said anything, it would have a racial tinge to it. So he just sucked it all up and walked away muttering something about Chanukah, Hanukkah, blah, 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 blah. Then he walked away. The anchor person, as I would be if I had made that same mistake, and I have made many, she was just very clearly embarrassed, but she wrote it down the correct way of pronouncing it. And that was the end of that. But no one called in. No one really wrote in. It was just in-house, went away in a split second. But it was remembered by the anchor lady for many years to come. And she would chat about it in embarrassment, and we all said, that happens. It's the nature of the business. Back to you in Connecticut.
That's great. Well, it's funny. Now that we've got a theme here of talking about practical jokes, we used to pull a bunch of them, and all right, one of the best ones is when we were doing the CBS morning news during one of its iterations. We had our director was Don Roy King, and the same Don Roy King who does Saturday Night Live today. But back then he did all the morning shows. He did, so anyway, and he's a great guy. He really is, really a great guy. And this was years ago. Well, anyway, Don was really into exercise. Like he worked out like 2 times a day, and he was very proud of it. And we all knew it. So when he came to do the show, Don liked to direct standing up. Now, you would say this isn't really that big a deal, okay? Except it was, because the director has a microphone and all of the communication equipment so that he can talk to everybody that he needs to talk to. And when you're standing up, the microphone wouldn't pick you up and you'd have to lean over. It was uncomfortable. So construction built a podium that would sit on top of where he sat, where he stood, and they would lift all the equipment onto this podium. It was a special podium that they would plug in, and then all the equipment would work from this podium, so he could do it standing up. Now, he understood that it was sort of a pain in the ass because we had to go on and set it up in the morning. It was just one other thing that the technicians had to do, and he was sensitive to that. So when the show ended, we would have to break it down because other people would come in to do the show, the regular sitting down. So he would always volunteer to put the podium off in the corner himself. He said, you guys don't have to do it. I'll do it. So one day our boss got the idea of, we started putting camera weights in the podium, and we put just a few a day. Like 1 week where there would be an extra 5 pounds, and then the next week there would be 10 pounds, and then there would be we got up to almost like 50 pounds of camera weights. But Don would never say anything because he was into working out. So it became so well known that at the end of the show, without him knowing, the entire crew, we would all sit around and would be watching to wait for him to do it. And he would near the end, he would and he didn't want to say anything. Well, finally, I don't know, I think it went on for maybe a month. And then we told him, and he laughed. He had a great sense of humor. He got it, but we did those things. The other cool story that I've got is back when they banned smoking. Okay, smoking was no longer illegal. However, we had a director for the evening news who refused to not smoke in the control room, and for a while he was powerful enough where he got away with it. Okay. So one day he comes in with this little box, all right, and they go, what's the box? And he goes, oh, it's this device that'll help me stop smoking. And what it does is it sets out a beep, okay? And every time it beeps, I can have a cigarette. And it's programmed to spread the beeps out longer and longer. So over time, I will take cigarettes in longer and longer intervals, and eventually I'll stop smoking. So the first thing that happened after he left is the audio guy made a recording of the beep. He put it on a cartridge, put a broadcast cartridge machine underneath the audio console where he could hit it with his foot, and he put it into the speaker next to where the director sat, which is where the box was. So randomly he would hit the cart and the cart would go beep and the director would have a cigarette. And after about a month, this guy was having a cigarette like every 20 minutes. And he's going, this thing is fantastic. I mean, I'm having no problem quitting smoking. So we were mean fuckers. Yeah. So anyway, Garry, what's your story about what was it? Sybil Shepherd? Was that it?
I have one. Yeah, I have one that's going. We're it's interesting that we're varying from what we said we would talk about at the top of the show, but that's what we do. You were talking about strength and stuff. Back in the middle 70s, I believe it was, we had Buster Crabbe. You'll remember Buster Crabbe come into the studio, and he was, I think he was selling vacuum cleaners at that point, if I'm correct, something like that. But we got him to sit down and talk about some of his old movies, the Flash Gordon movies. And Buster Crabbe had to be in his 70s at that time, I believe. And I should say that the news desk was made of balsa wood. We didn't know how weak it was, but we would find out. And Buster Crabbe was talking animatedly about his Hollywood career, and he was flexing his muscles and showing how wonderful his physique was. And towards the end of the interview, he said, "Let me show you how strong I am. I'm not making this stuff up." And he went to pound the table, and he did pound the table, and the table just splintered in half. The splinters went all over the place. The mic fell off. Everyone was laughing. The studio microphone, which was a boom mic at that point, fell down from the roof, and we had to cut to a commercial. How do you recover from that?
That's live stuff that happens on the air. I remember God, when we first got robotic cameras. When we first got robotic cameras, oh my God! Which was the thing about robotic cameras is you used to have a cameraman for each camera, okay? But with robotics, you could have one guy running 4 cameras, okay? And because you could pre-program camera moves. So the guy would just push a button and it would do a 2-shot and push a button. And these cameras, I mean, were fully robotic. They could travel all across the studio. They could pan up, pan down, tilt, focus, everything. Except in the early days, they sort of had a tendency to go out of control. And these things were huge. I mean, these things weighed like 1,000 pounds, and they had powerful motors. And you were warned to stay out of their way. So I think it was local. And they were doing an interview. They had a special interview set. And the camera went rogue, and it was on the air, and it just started heading toward the set, right? And you turn and you could see the anchor, and she's like, ah! And bang, it crashed into the set, and they couldn't get it off the air. Oh, it was hilarious. I remember they did the opening to there was a brief period of time when Connie Chung was a co-host with Dan Rather on the evening news, and the robotics had first come out. And so they started off on a 2-shot, and the first story was Connie's, and so Dan threw to Connie, and Connie started to talk, and the camera was supposed to do a really cool move where it went to the 2-shot to a single shot of Dan. No, actually a single shot of Connie, forgive me, except it zoomed into Dan Rather's nose. and they couldn't get it off the air. So Connie is blissfully reading this, her story, and all you can see is, a close up of Dan Rather's nose. It was just great stuff. And then the other classic, my God, you got me going. We would always have a problem with flashing on, okay? When you have to, we interrupt this program for a CBS News special report, okay? Well, there are times during the day when there's no crew, okay? So if we have to flash on during those times, we're screwed. And CBS got caught more than once. So to get around this, the easy thing is you just have a crew standing by, but that would cost money. So no. So what they did was we had a special flash studio. It was actually called the Douglas Edwards Flash Studio, named after Douglas Edwards. And they put a camera up on a shelf at the top of the studio that looked down at the desk, okay? And then they put what's called a PZM microphone. It was called a floor mic, which could pick up anything. It just had to sit on the desk. You didn't have to put it on. So whoever, in this case, Dan Rather, whoever needed to be on the air could just run into the studio, put the microphone on, put his IFB in, and TX, the transmission center, the master control for the CBS television network, would put him on the air, okay? And we never used it. And it wasn't a robotic camera. It was just a camera, okay? So something happened. I think it might have been the San Francisco earthquake, the one that was during the World Series playoffs, because ABC was covering it. And ABC, of course, was there live. It happened live while they were covering the game. And they had great coverage, but of course we had nobody. So, per the plan, Dan ran into the flash studio, put his IFB in, TX put him on the air, and he started reporting. Now, the only problem was nobody had looked at this camera in a long time because you could only see it from the transmission center, and it was just a monitor in the corner. Well, somebody, probably a stagehand at some point, bumped the camera, okay? And the camera shot was changed. So all you saw was Dan Rather's head, okay, and a ton of headroom. So they flashed on with Dan. Basically, it looked like Dan Rather was just peeking up above the desk and talking. So and of course there was nothing anybody could do about it because one, it wasn't robotic. Two, the transmission center was about 200 feet down the hall, and three, they would have had to run up. There was only one guy in TX, so he couldn't do it. You would have to find a ladder, get up, and adjust it on the air. So they just went with it. So that's that. So Garry, you had one more story about Sybil Shepherd, you said?
Yeah, but I'm gonna put Sybil on hold because we're on a run now about these media stories. Both of you will remember when news went from film to ENG, electronic news gathering or videotape, so to speak, with the ability to go live at any point. We covered everything, even if it wasn't a major news event. Well, New England, Boston, very famous for covering weather. Weather is still the number one topic when it comes up. Well, we were supposed to have a blizzard, and whether or not we actually got snow that day, the night before, all the weather people were predicting a heavy snowfall. So they had me out for the early morning newscast, and I was at a place on somewhere north of Boston where snow usually came down in large amounts. And I could hear the anchor introducing me saying, we have blizzard-like conditions in Andover, the town. And I was on Route 95 or 495, something like that. I could hear them introducing me. And my problem was, as I looked around to survey the background, was we had no snow. The ground was clear. Well, I gave a cue to one of the people in the van. He came out, and we had this set up just as a goof off. We never thought that we would have to do this for real. But as they were counting down for me to go live, we had two people actually on either side of the camera, and they were on cinder blocks. And as we went live, they were pouring not cornflakes, they were pouring baking soda on one side and ivory snowflakes on the other side, so it looked like snow was coming down. And it made for a great effect. And I was talking about how heavy the snow was coming down, and you could see the baking soda on one side and the ivory snow coming down on the other side. It was very effective, except we had a second camera, which I was not aware of. They had sent a second van to glorify what we were doing. And the second van showed clearly me talking about the blizzard, but it also showed these two guys dumping snowflakes and baking soda on top of me. And everyone else was laughing. And once we went back to the studio, the anchors in the studio were laughing, and they had a box shot of me talking to the two guys who had been dumping baking soda and snowflakes on me. And that was that.
That is
Sometimes
great.
call
That
it.
is great.
Sometimes
Yeah, sometimes you can't make this
Another
up.
quickie. We
Sure.
had a drought, and the point was the drought usually came up in late afternoon. It was midsummer, so we were sent out, and this was back in the film days. We were sent out to one of the areas that had problems with fires breaking out. We got to the spot and we were fighting the clock. And again, because it was film, we had to factor in the time of getting the video, getting it back to the studio, getting it processed, as we've discussed in other shows. So we got to the spot where we thought we would see flames breaking out. We didn't see any flames. And I looked at my watch and I said, I've got to find flames. So I ran for 30 yards all around me, didn't see anything. And I said to my cameraman, I'm going to go over that hill. You wait about 30 or 35 seconds, then you come running over the hill. And once you get to the top of the hill, you just start, there'll be flames. And he said, well, how do you know? And I said, I guarantee you we'll find flames. And he said, but I don't see any smoke, Garry. I said, you can trust me, you'll see flames. So I said to him, remember, 35 seconds and then just come over the hill and be rolling as you come over the hill. My mistake was that the cameraman, who was a wonderful guy, but he had this manic sense of humor. I should have remembered that. I go over the hill. I found some shrubbery, and I looked at my watch, and I bent down, and we shouldn't let anyone know about this. We'll keep this to yourself. I started a fire going. And as I was starting the fire to go, and I was using my hands to blow the smoke up, and it was building up really nicely. What I didn't realize was that as I was starting the fire, the cameraman was looking right down at me. He was rolling on me, starting this brush fire. And I thought to myself, what's going to happen? Because the film was being fed back at the same time to the station. So as they were promoting Channel 7's Garry Armstrong right on top of the fire, we had video of Garry setting a brush fire. Never heard the end of that one. Never heard the end of that.
Oh,
At some point,
that is
that when people were talking about arsonist, my name would come up.
Yeah, you go.
that is classic.
Remember, I won an Emmy. I'm an Emmy
You won an Emmy,
award-winning
yeah.
reporter.
Winning and you're Emmy award-winning arsonist. Well, guys, I can't believe it. We did it again. We are so far over. It's not even funny, but I'm not cutting any of this. Again, we've gotten to the end, and let's see. We have to do the mandatory plugs. So let's bring them up here. First, of course, the podcast that Garry's lovely wife Marilyn and him and me and many times my wife Ellen contribute to, Serendipity, Seeking Intelligent Life on Earth. And guess what? We are still, in fact, looking. And of course, the my sister podcast, Get Off My Lawn, with me, Tom Curley, where we talk about life, the universe, and, well, quite frankly, whatever somebody put in the teleprompter. And of course, Voicescapes Audio Theater, my audio theater group for the best in audio theater and drama. I know I've heard all the material. So guys, again, thank you so much for coming. Great stuff, John. We'll get to more stories the next time. Thank you for showing up for a second time. Very brave of you. And of course the response to your last performance was actually phenomenal. We loved all the stories. So all I can say, guys, is toodaloo.